Imagine you spend 8 years of your life building something. 8 years. You hire the best people. You pour hundreds of millions of dollars into it. You tell your entire company, this is going to be the future. This is going to be our Star Wars. This is going to change everything. And then, the world sees it. And 14 days later, it's gone. Not because of a hack, not because of a lawsuit, not because of a natural disaster, because nobody wanted it. In August 2024, Sony Interactive Entertainment, one of the most powerful gaming companies on the planet, released a game called Concord. It had been in development for 8 years. It reportedly cost between $200 and $400 million to make. Sony believed so much in this game, they called it internally the future of PlayStation. On August 23, 2024, Concord launched. At its absolute peak, on PC, it had 697 players online simultaneously. Not 697,000, 697 people. 14 days later, Sony pulled the plug. Every copy was refunded. Every server was shut down. Every trace of the game was removed from digital storefronts. And 2 months after that, the entire studio that built it, Firewalk Studios, was permanently closed. 210 people lost their jobs. This is the story of the most expensive failure in gaming history. And the lessons it left behind for every studio, every publisher, and every person who has ever been too afraid to hear the truth are impossible to ignore. Part 1. Who built this thing? To understand how Concord happened, you first need to understand who made it. The story begins in 2018. A company called Probably Monsters, yes, that is the real name, was founded with an unusual mission. Rather than building one big studio, they wanted to create multiple smaller studios under one umbrella, each working on their own name with shared resources and support. One of those studios was Firewalk Studios. Firewalk was led by a team of veterans. Many of them had spent years at Bungie, the studio behind the original Halo trilogy and the Destiny franchise. These were people who knew how to build massive multiplayer games. They had experience. They had credentials. They had pedigree. Their vision? A brand new hero shooter. A team-based multiplayer game set in a retro-futuristic science fiction universe. Think Guardians of the Galaxy meets Overwatch, with a cast of unique characters, each with their own weapons and abilities, competing in 5 versus 5 matches. In April 2021, Sony came calling. PlayStation signed a deal with Probably Monsters to publish Firewalk's game. They invested heavily, reportedly over $200 million just as the initial development deal. Sony wanted to own the future of live service gaming, and Firewalk seemed like the perfect partner to help them get there. 2 years later, in April 2023, Sony went even further. They didn't just want to publish the game. They bought the entire studio. Sony acquired Firewalk Studios from Probably Monsters, paying an undisclosed sum to bring approximately 150 developers fully in-house as part of PlayStation Studios. At that moment, Firewalk wasn't just making a game for Sony, they were Sony, and Sony had enormous plans for what was coming. Part 2. The dream Sony had. To understand why Sony bet so heavily on Concord, you need to understand the position the company was in. Sony's PlayStation division had a problem. A single-player game, no matter how good, makes most of its money in the first few weeks after launch. After that, sales slow down. The game is done. You move on to the next one. Live service games, games like Fortnite, Destiny, Apex Legends, and Overwatch, work completely differently. They don't just sell once, they sell forever. They have battle passes, season updates, cosmetic items, monthly content drops. Fortnite has made over $26 billion since its launch, not from selling copies, from selling skins, emotes, and season passes. Sony looked at those numbers and made a decision. They needed their own Fortnite, their own Destiny, their own live service machine that would generate revenue around the clock every single day, indefinitely. And internally, Concord was meant to be exactly that. Part 3. The warning signs nobody listened to. Here is where the story gets truly dark, because the signs were there. They were visible, they were loud, and nobody listened. Concord was first revealed to the public at the PlayStation Showcase in May 2023. A cinematic trailer, no gameplay, just characters and world building. The reaction online was immediate and brutal. Comments flooded in. The character designs were called generic, unappealing, derivative. People compared them unfavorably to Overwatch, a game that had launched 7 years earlier. The reveal trailer received hundreds of thousands of dislikes. Gaming communities on Reddit, Twitter, and YouTube were largely negative. The consensus was almost universal. This did not look like something people wanted to play. Now, here is the critical question. What do you do when the world tells you something isn't working? If you're Firewalk Studios, apparently you ignore it. Inside the studio, you were not allowed to say anything negative about the game. If you thought a character design wasn't working, you kept that to yourself. If you felt the business model was wrong, you stayed quiet. If you believed the game wasn't ready, you smiled and nodded. In July 2024, just 1 month before launch, Concord held a public beta test. This was the world's first real chance to play the game, and the numbers that came back were catastrophic. Player counts were described as underwhelming, dramatically below expectations. The beta for a game of this size, with Sony's full promotional support, should have attracted hundreds of thousands of players. It didn't. Former developer accounts suggest that even then, with the beta numbers staring them in the face, the prevailing attitude inside Firewalk was that things would improve once the full game launched, that people just needed to actually play it, that the world would come around. 1 month later, they found out the truth. Part 4, Launch Day. The numbers, the silence. August 23, 2024. Concord officially launched on PlayStation 5 and PC. Price, $40. In a market where its direct competitors, Overwatch 2, Apex Legends, and Valorant, were all completely free to play, this was already a problem nobody had solved. Why would someone pay $40 for a hero shooter when they could download Overwatch 2 for free in 30 seconds? But the team believed the quality would speak for itself, that players would recognize what they had built and pay for it. The first day came. The Steam player count, publicly visible to anyone on the internet, showed the numbers in real time. At its absolute peak, Concord had 697 concurrent players on PC. For context, Palworld, an indie game released earlier that year, had over 2 million concurrent players at its peak. Helldivers 2, another PlayStation-published game from the same year, had over 400,000. The gaming internet exploded. Screenshots of the Steam player count went viral immediately. The number became a meme. It became a symbol. 697, the number that defined one of the most embarrassing launches in gaming history. 25,000 copies. For a game that cost up to $400 million to make. 10 days after launch, Sony made an announcement. Concord would be taken offline. All servers shut down. All sales stopped. And every single person who had purchased the game would receive a full refund. The game had lasted 14 days, making Concord the second shortest-lived online game in history. Part 5, The Aftermath. The studio, the People game director Ryan Ellis, the man who had led Concord's development, hosted a message to PlayStation's official blog. He said Firewalk would explore options to, and this is a direct quote, better reach our players. Many people held out hope. Maybe the game would relaunch. Maybe Sony would retool it as a free-to-play title. That hope lasted approximately 7 weeks. On October 29, 2024, Sony PlayStation's Studio Business Group CEO Herman Hultz made the announcement that ended all speculation. Firewalk Studios was permanently closed. Approximately 210 people were affected. Some were offered internal transfers to other Sony studios. Others were simply laid off. Their careers, at least at Firewalk, over. Ryan Ellis, who had publicly hinted at a potential relaunch just weeks earlier, quietly stepped down from his role as game director. These were talented people, experienced developers. Many of them had spent years building this game, some of the entire 8-year development cycle. They believed in what they were making. They described their colleagues as talented and kind. They said it was the first studio where they truly felt equal and respected. And yet, the beautiful car, as they put it, was crashed. Not because the people weren't good enough, but because the leadership couldn't hear the truth. Part 6. Why did this really happen? So, what actually went wrong? Because it wasn't just one thing, it never is. First, the game was chasing a trend had already passed. Concord was designed around the Overwatch model from 2016. A paid hero shooter with a colorful cast of characters. That model worked brilliantly in 2016. But by 2024, the entire market had shifted. Overwatch itself had gone free to play. Every major competitor in the genre was free. Charging $40 to enter that space was not brave, it was oblivious. 8 years of development meant the game's fundamental assumptions were formed in a world that no longer existed by the time it launched. Second, the characters didn't connect. This is painful to say, because real humans designed those characters and cared about them, but the market reaction was consistent and overwhelming. Third, the marketing was invisible. Sony typically spends aggressively on marketing their major releases. Concord's marketing was almost entirely confined to online ads and paid sponsorship streams. There were no billboards, no theaters, no mainstream cultural presence. Concord is the most expensive sunk cost fallacy in gaming history. So, what is the real lesson of Concord? It's not the hero shooters don't work. Overwatch is still running. Apex Legends is still running. The real lesson is about honesty. When the beta numbers came in and they were terrible, someone needed to stand up and say, we need to delay. We need to change the business model. We need to make this free to play. We need to rethink the character designs. Nobody did. Or if they did, nobody listened. If this story hit different for you, it should. Because the lessons here don't just apply to game studios. They apply to every team, every company, every project where people stop being honest with each other. Subscribe if you want more real stories from inside the gaming industry. Every week, no fluff. See you in the next one.